Hi everyone, this is Cooking with Kurt. Today my husband Donald and I are going to show you how to make Ube Cheese Pandesal. Pandesal is a Filipino bread bun that's rolled in breadcrumbs, and this version is stuffed with cheese and flavored with ube.
This recipe was requested by a lot of you, and we hope you like this video.
Now you can use this dough recipe to make traditional plain pandesal as well by just leaving out the cheese and ube from the dough.
We'll talk more about those adjustments later.
In this recipe, we're using a bread starter which greatly improves the texture and flavor of the final pandesal. Take a small mixing bowl and add in 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 1/4 teaspoon of active dry or instant yeast, and half a cup of cool water. Mix this together with your hands until it forms a cohesive dough. Cover tightly with a lid or plastic wrap. We're going to leave this at room temperature for 12 to 16 hours or overnight. The benefit of making a starter is that the yeast has more time to act on the starch and proteins in the dough, which creates a more complex flavor in your pandesal. Make sure to shut the opening in your leftover yeast packet with a rubber band or tape and store it in the fridge to use the next day. After the starter has fermented at room temperature overnight, it should have expanded and look bubbly.
Now we're going to make the rest of the dough. Take a small skillet, turn the stove on to medium heat, add in 2/3 cup of whole milk and let it heat for about 1 minute. Then pour the hot milk into a large stainless steel or glass mixing bowl. Add in 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar and whisk until the sugar has dissolved. Continue whisking to help the milk cool down faster to 105 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. When the milk reaches about 105 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit, add in 2 teaspoons of instant or active dry yeast, which should be the remaining packet from the day before, and just gently swirl it to combine, and let it sit for 10 minutes. This step helps activate the yeast and is also a test if the yeast is still good. While the yeast is proofing, melt 5 tablespoons of butter and let it come to room temperature. The yeast-milk mixture should turn foamy after 10 minutes and look something like this. If your mixture does not turn foamy after 10 minutes and there's no activity in the yeast, throw out the mixture and start again with newer yeast, as this means your yeast will not work.
And we've made this mistake before, trust us, it's very sad and the dough becomes very dense. So when you're confident that your yeast works, add in 1/4 cup of ube halaya, 2 large eggs, all of the bread starter from the day before, 7 tablespoons of granulated sugar, 2 teaspoons of salt, 1 tablespoon of ube extract, and 5 tablespoons of room temperature melted butter. As we mentioned earlier, if you're making plain pandesal buns, just leave out the ube halaya and ube extract at this step. Whisk this mixture together a bit till it's somewhat combined. Then add 3½ cups of all-purpose flour. Mix this flour in by hand just until you get a cohesive dough and you no longer see any dry flour. Then turn the dough onto a smooth, clean surface and knead it by hand for about 20 to 25 minutes. The dough may be slightly sticky at first, so it might be necessary to use a bench scraper while kneading. But after kneading it for 20 to 25 minutes, it should form an elastic ball. Continue kneading it until the dough feels elastic and passes the windowpane test, which is just to take a bit of dough and stretch it out in your fingers so it looks like a thin membrane with little light passing through it, but it should still feel stretchy and elastic. You can also use a stand mixer for this step with the dough hook attachment. Knead it for about 5 to 10 minutes on low-medium speed, which is a level 2 on a KitchenAid.
You can also use a bread machine set on the dough cycle. When the dough is ready, grease a clean, large bowl and place the dough in it and cover with plastic wrap. We're going to let this dough rest at room temperature for 1 hour. After 1 hour, fold the edges of the dough into the center, flip it over in the bowl, and recover with plastic wrap. We're going to let this rest at room temperature for another hour. In the meantime, take a 13-inch by 18-inch baking sheet and line it with parchment paper. Set this aside. Next, we're going to prepare the cheese stuffing. Cut 24 cubes of Edam cheese. You can also use Gouda cheese. I'm cutting approximately half-inch cubes of Edam cheese here. Then add 1/3 cup of breadcrumbs into a small, shallow pan for rolling the pandesal buns.
When the dough has risen, lightly grease a smooth, clean surface with vegetable oil to prevent the dough from sticking. Turn the dough onto it and divide the dough into half. Roll these 2 pieces of dough to form 2 long logs. Using a bench scraper, divide each log into 12 equal pieces so that we end up with 24 small pieces of dough. Take each piece of dough and lightly press down with your cupped hand while doing a circular motion. This will tighten up the skin of the dough and create more even spheres. As you roll them into tight balls, it will become more obvious which balls are smaller and which are bigger. Redistribute dough accordingly so that the 24 balls are all approximately the same size. And redo the circular cupped palm rolling as needed, till all the balls have taut skin. Then take one ball at a time, flatten the dough out with your fingers to make a disc that's about 2 to 3 inches in diameter. Place a cube of cheese in the middle, and then fold the dough into the center and pinch to cover the cheese completely. Firm up the dough again by placing the seam side down and rolling it under your cupped palm, similar to before, but this time with less pressure. Pressing down too hard will cause the cube of cheese inside to pierce through the top. Roll the dough in the breadcrumbs till all the surfaces are covered in breadcrumbs. Then place the bun onto the prepared 13 by 18-inch baking sheet lined with parchment paper. Repeat this with all 24 buns, so that each bun contains a cube of cheese inside. This rolling motion will ensure the seam at the bottom is securely sealed, so the cheese will not melt out while baking. The 24 buns should be placed onto the parchment paper lined baking sheet with 6 buns across and 4 buns down. They should be distributed as evenly as possible with space in between, as these buns will expand further. Loosely cover the buns with plastic wrap. If you're making traditional plain pandesal buns, just leave out the cheese and roll the dough in breadcrumbs after forming them into balls. We're going to leave these to proof and rise for another 2 hours, until they're puffy and almost doubled in size. Towards the end of the 2-hour proofing time, remove all the racks from the oven except for a rack at the lowest level. Then on this bottom rack, place an oven-safe skillet or shallow baking pan to the right side of the oven. Close the oven door, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and start to boil about 2 cups of water. When your oven is at 350 degrees Fahrenheit and your 2 cups of water has reached boiling point, carefully pour the 2 cups of boiling water into the hot skillet that was in the preheated oven. Be careful of the resulting hot steam or splashing. Then uncover the buns, place a rack in the middle height of the oven, and place the pandesal buns on this middle rack towards the opposite side of the oven as the boiling water below, which is in the left side in this case, so that the steam from the skillet can easily rise and waft onto the pandesal buns. We're going to bake our pandesal for 20 to 25 minutes. Now, the boiling water technique is optional, but the steam helps the pandesal buns rise and create a nice crust. The pandesal buns are ready after 20 minutes if you want a softer and fluffier texture, and 25 minutes for a slightly crustier texture. And there it is, Ube Cheese Pandesal. Ang sarap!
Sarap! Yum!
So good. It's a perfect breakfast.
There's nothing quite like freshly baked homemade bread.
Thank you all for watching. Please let us know in the comment section below if you're planning to make this Ube Cheese Pandesal. Send us pictures of your creations on Facebook and Instagram. The links are below. And if you like this video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to Cooking with Kurt.
And don't forget to click on the bell so you get notified when we post new cooking videos.
Maraming salamat!